share what you do, how you do it, and why people should care.
Well, I was originally by trade a social worker. I was a trauma therapist for 13 years, and then I worked for a subsidiary of DHS. And I got all this education and master's, part of my PhD, and then I had severe burnout. I had a case where we had a child fatality, and I couldn't really recover from that on my caseload. So between the stress of my job aggravating my medical disability, I was pretty much incapacitated. So I left my job and I retired from social work. And on the realm of health and wellness, shout out to Penn Behavioral Health and Penn Medicine, because I have multiple doctors helping me, who got me back on my feet. And for a while, I'm applying for Social Security disability, which was kind of devastating for me because I had worked so hard to get to where I was for like 20 years. It's something I was totally passionate about, but I realized I had to leave that passion and go into something else. So for a while, I just worked on getting better and getting stable and physically able to do things. The SSD process, for anyone who's gone through it, is over 2 years. I got a phone call. She's like, you got approved to be seen before a judge. And I said, oh, that's great. And she said, yeah, it should be about 2 years from now. I said, oh, okay. So in that meantime, I was like, how am I going to support myself? Because you're not allowed to work when you're doing SSD. So she said, well, not sure how you're going to do that, but you can't work because if you work, you're disqualified. So I said, I could end up homeless. She's like, that's not an SSD problem. I said, okay. So I hung up, had to reevaluate my life plan. And my service dog, I got very depressed. And I was in bed a lot. I was in a lot of pain, and I couldn't do anything. And he was very annoying, but in a good way. And he would get me out of bed. He's very good at pulling back all the covers, getting me out of bed, assisting me. And my relationship with my service dog has been amazing. That would be him talking. And he's just been such a support for me. And he actually reconnected me with like positivity and getting up. And if he was working so hard for me, I decided that I needed to start working again. So I started volunteering at Paws, and I'm an artist, so I did photography of their pets and stuff like that to get them more adopted, and I got more into that. And I ended up becoming a foster parent for a dog, which I was not anticipating. And during this whole recovery period, I had 4 dogs. I had a Great Dane, I had a foster dog, my service dog, and a service dog in training that I was training for someone else. And I got very overwhelmed, but at the same time, everybody kept telling me, oh, well, you can make a living just walking dogs. So I said, okay, walking dogs. So physically that was challenging, but I decided to take that on. So I began walking dogs just to get extra cash. And then I got morphed into dog training in West Philly because I trained service dogs for veterans. And I got exposed to the pit bull phenomenon of West Philadelphia, which West Philly community is very tight, and they rescue pits on a regular basis. But the problem is the pits need a lot of rehabilitation, and they have a lot of stigma. And so I started working with a large amount of pits and training them, and then I got more clients and training them, and I started to realize that I didn't have to leave my entire career that I had before behind. Like, I could take those skill sets with me. So I ended up working with post-traumatic stress dogs instead of post-traumatic stress people. And I wanted to be a foster parent for kids, but I ended up being a foster parent for a dog. And so things started to just kind of shape and change, and I realized that the psychology that I studied, the animal behavior that I studied, the trauma that I studied, all was applicable to what I was trying to do to survive and make money and just live during this 2-year abyss of Social Security disability. So I started forming a more concrete plan instead of winging it with a dog here and a dog there. So I took the past skill set of organizational management and started creating a business that has to do with 3 concepts, which is dog walking, which is very simplistic and easy for me and supports me financially during this abyss period. And then there's a dog training period where I work with a very large amount of dogs now and a very broad spectrum type of dogs. But I do have a lot of pits, and I've become very passionate about pits, as someone else here had a pit. And they're not my favorite dog at first, but now they've grown on me, and they're very sweet, but they're very traumatized. So I started applying my skill set to my business plan of how to work with traumatized dogs and rehabilitate dogs that were in shelters. And it started to really come together, and it was great. And I was working but not working because it's all, you know, my own thing. And it was wonderful, and I started to feel better. I wasn't depressed, and I was happier. My physical capabilities got better. And then it expanded into my introduction into fosters of dogs and the actual, like, seriousness of the need for fosters for dogs through PAWS and ACCT, because I found out it was almost as bad as the foster care system that we have here, because there's over 3.9 million dogs and 3.4 million cats nationwide in shelters as of 2016. So these are all dogs and cats that are in shelters, and the shelters are overpopulated, and there's no crates. Just like in foster care, there's no beds. So I was having this very severe parallel process, but I wasn't having the post-traumatic stress from my job. So, sorry. So I started doing research and formulating my business plan into fosters and how to help them, and that fostering but also training dogs reduces the recidivism of dogs going back into the shelter, because on average there's 700, just the SPCA has 726 dogs returned after they've been adopted because of behavioral problems. So
is that average per month?
Per year. Okay. Per year. So that's high, you know, for amount of dogs. It doesn't seem like a big number, but that's just for one organization. That's not for tons of other organizations that rescue and do shelter work. I mean, PAWS, for example, saves over 2,000 dogs and cats a year through foster, just foster alone. So
let me ask you something before I forget or you go too far. When you're talking about a service dog, how many hours of training must a service dog compete to be a service dog?
Hours? How about years?
Tell me about it.
So I've had Gavin for 11 years. Training a service dog on average takes 2 years. But they take a year to train and then a year service dog in training. So service dog in training gets public access in Pennsylvania. So you can go into businesses, you can go into various types of stores, grocery stores, pharmacies, and public transportation, and you do a lot of public access work for the second year. So they're totally stable to work in any environment. Unfortunately, it's during the second year that 50% of service dogs wash out and you have to start over.
Explain.
So service dogs can do really well with task training in home, but then when they get out in the public, they have severe anxiety. They can't, like, performance anxiety. They can't handle stressors in the environment. Sometimes it's the breed. Shepherds are amazing dogs for training, but sometimes they're also very prone to anxiety. So I had a service dog that was in training that was a shepherd that washed out after a year because she would go out in public and just be so freaked out and so nervous she couldn't do the job. So we had to wash her out, but she went to emotional support animals. So a lot of dogs that are washed out from service transfer to emotional support animals.
Explain the difference.
So service dogs have full access. They work for disability. They assist you in any disability that you have. There's all different types of service dogs. A lot of people know seeing eye dogs, for example. The most challenging is people who have service dogs like me for invisible disabilities. So people don't understand why you have a service dog. You can get service dogs for diabetes, migraines, seizures, mobility.
Really?
Yeah, tons of different dogs. So Gavin is a medical alert dog and a psychiatric service dog. So they do the mental health portion for PTSD, for example, or OCD for me. And then he also does medical for relating to hypoglycemia, fainting episodes, migraines, fibromyalgia, mobility work, going up and down 13 stairs. Yeah, so he does a whole bunch of things. But dogs can do 2 different services like Gavin does. So he does the mental health and the medical. But
and then you have the emotional support. What's that?
The emotional support is dogs that help mitigate mostly mental health problems, anxiety, depression. They don't have public access. They work mostly in the home. You can't take them on public transportation. The only place you can take emotional support animals without much difficulty is on the airline. They will allow you to travel with emotional support animals on planes because of the severe anxiety that a lot of people have with public transportation on planes. So that's really the only place that you can take emotional support animals. They don't have access to stores, grocery stores, pharmacy. You can't take them on public transportation. You can't do any of that. They just work in the home. And they comfort people. They interrupt tasks, like interrupt OCD tasks, like picking or repetitive tasks, things like that. But they don't work full time.
So how is a dog trained to identify these? Is the
very
OCD
slowly.
The OCD
Very slowly.
piece is interesting. How could a dog intervene?
So, certain tasks are innate. So, diabetic alert dogs, for example, it's an innate ability to sense sugar levels dropping or hypoglycemic levels, or seizure alert dogs. That's an innate task that you then support. You can't train that from zero. But OCD tasks, for example, sorry, that was Gavin. OCD tasks, for example, I have repetitive tasks where I will repetitively either pick at something or like hit something over and over and over again. So he's trained to nudge my hand and move that and stop the interruptive task. If you're picking or pulling your hair, they'll move your hand to stop you from doing it. So for some people, it's really important because they'll do picking, for example, which can really damage your skin, and they can bleed. They pick so bad. So the interruptive task for that is really important. People who repetitively clean, they can interrupt that task, or wash their hands. They'll repetitively wash their hands. They'll get up on the counter and interrupt that task. So it can really help medical issues that then become exacerbated. So.
Okay. Well, we have a question on Facebook Live, actually. You can probably read it.
I'm not sure where it is. I was wondering about service dogs for cerebral palsy since I deal with that. Yes, so cerebral palsy would be something that would probably help you with mobility tasks, and also something that would help you with retrievals. Like if you drop something on the floor, the dog can then pick it up. Dogs are trained to pick something up as small as a paper clip and give it to you. But they would help you with getting dressed. They can pull off your socks, put on your socks. They can help you pick up things off the floor. They can help you put your shirt on. They can be trained to do a variety of tasks. And it would still be approximately a 2-year process to do the service dog work for that.
So what's the process of getting a service dog? What would he have to do? What would he have to apply for? Who would he have to talk to?
It totally depends on how he would want to go about it. There's 2 options. You can do a program dog or owner-trained service dog. A program dog will cost you a minimum of $35,000 just to do the training. It's not covered by insurance. Plus the cost of the dog, which can range from $500 to almost $2,000. Yeah, Gavin wants airtime. But the cost of a dog alone can be $500 to $2,000 plus the $35,000 for training for 2 years. But that's the program dog. The owner-trained service dog, which is what Gavin is, you purchase a dog, you rescue a dog, and then you determine you have to do the temperament testing. So you find someone who's a trainer who can do temperament testing, make sure the dog is solid enough to do the work, because the work is very demanding and it's 24/7. So the dog has to be stable enough, emotional enough, and really solid dog to do the work. So you can use rescues for service dogs. They do that. Prisons take dogs in that have been rescued. They do the basic training, and then you can get a puppy from a prison program to work as a service dog. But to do owner-trained service dog work, you train the dog to mitigate your disability with the help of a trainer. So the trainer works with you one-to-one to help you train the dog specifically to mitigate your specific disability. The range of costs for that can be $1,000 to $20,000. It depends on the complexity of the task and what the dog needs to do. And it depends on what the trainer charges for hourly rates. Usually service dog work is a higher cost than just general training.
Well, it's probably a really good time to give out your contact information.
So I'm at WP Creative Pets. I'm on Facebook for WP Creative Pets. My phone number is 215-941-2956. And my email is wpcreativepets@gmail.com.
Alright, he says he's going to look into it. He never knew it was an option.
Yes, it's definitely an option. Definitely an option. And definitely something you want to talk over and consider before you jump into the pool of service dog work. But it's definitely an option, and it can help people, especially with mobility stuff like cerebral palsy. That's very challenging, and a service dog could definitely help you out with that.
Alright, so tell us a little bit more about what you're doing currently and the benefits to the community, to the animal population, to the population who needs a service dog. I literally had a friend on the way here say he wants a service dog because he's disabled or on disability. Talk to the community of people who may be facing or experiencing some issues or concerns or whatever you're going to classify them as, that they may be considering a service dog or the like. So just shed some light on what that's like, what the population's like, what some commonalities, and just talk in general.
I think sometimes if you've never had a dog, an option to actually expose yourself to it before you jump into service dog work, which is a huge life commitment, is to actually foster a dog. Because then you can have a dog and maybe even the type of dog you're interested in and the breed that you need, and foster a dog and realize the commitment of having a dog first, which can
really
be...
quick, what are the top breeds for service dogs, statistically?
Labs, Shepherds, Huskies, large breed dogs, but the small breed dogs are discriminated against. There are multiple small breed dogs that work, Chihuahuas, very small miniature pinchers, things like that. But large breed dogs are usually used. Labs are the most common. And then Shepherds are mixes between Shepherds. There's Great Danes that are used for service dogs, or Great Dane mixes. There's Pit Bulls that are used for service dogs. They do get discriminated against just because of their breed, but it is getting better. So you can use almost any dog, but you really have to be cognizant of what dog needs to do for you and if that breed is appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Are the terms service dog and therapy dogs interchangeable?
No, they're specifically different. Therapy dogs are used by clinicians to actually do therapy with a client and to work on emotional issues and reduce anxiety and help with coping skills or the OCD skills, for example, that occur during clinical sessions or things of that nature. And then service dogs are full working dogs, so they are separate. Yeah.
So a service dog wouldn't be able to be a therapy dog, say, at a hospital?
Usually they say no because the service dog would be forced to work split between more than one person. They would be trained to have to be alerting to you, and that's very distracting to be doing therapy at the same time that they're trying to be alerting. So an alert is crucial. If you miss an alert even by 5 minutes, some people can pass out. And if you're on the side of the road and you pass out and you miss an alert, then you could get hit by a car. So some things are really serious. So you don't want the dog distracted, and you want the dog 100% focused on you, which is one of the issues with people petting service dogs and coming up to service dogs and saying, oh, and they assume that service dogs are so friendly because they're working dogs, and they are very friendly. But the problem is that while you're petting the dog, my dog just missed the fact that my blood pressure dropped and I'm going to pass out.
So don't pet service dogs.
Ask to pet. Ask to pet.
Okay.
Some handlers, like Gavin, has a collar that says ask to pet. Some handlers are open to dogs being petted, but they have to give a command for the dog to be released to go say hi. Gavin has a release command for that. But other people really are very protective of not having their service dog touched at all while working or distracted at all. So the best bet is to actually approach the person, not the dog, because when you talk to the dog and not the person feels kind of slighted because, you know, we're here. And
You approach the person
you
before
approach
the
the
dog,
person
not-
before the dog. Yeah.
So a service dog is more so individually based, like for that person rather than a therapy dog where it could be...
Therapy dogs can be used in groups. It can
Got
be
it.
used individually. It can be used in trauma settings. When they had the mass shooting in Florida, there was over 11 or 13 therapy dogs that went down to assist the victims, but also the first responders, because they were so traumatized and stressed out and high anxiety that the therapy dogs were just there for that. So therapy dogs are used all over the country, and people register their therapy dogs to be used and dispatched during crisis or during things like Katrina or natural disasters and stuff like that.
Okay. Explain that circuit a little bit more.
Therapy dogs, there's Therapy Dog International, which is a huge organization that you can register dogs at. Gavin's registered as a therapy dog. He was a therapy dog before he became a service dog. And when they're called into duty, as you would say, usually it's for something that's really a crisis that's occurred, unfortunately. So natural disasters, shootings, school shootings, fires, anything that's really traumatizing. People will bring in their dogs. When 9/11 happened, there were tons of service dogs, but also rescue dogs, search and find dogs. And there was a ton of therapy dogs that were sent there because the people were just so devastated that they needed the therapy dogs just to do therapy, not just to do the search and rescue. Those dogs were separate. So they're utilized in a completely different capacity, but they're trained as well. They have to be very calm dogs. They have to be responsive. They have to be okay to be touched. Yeah, good temperament. They have to be able to be touched, to be handled, to deal with high stress. They're usually scent trained as well to deal with anxiety and identify people with higher anxiety than others, because you release pheromones when you're very stressed out. So the dog alerts to them. But yeah.
Is the training different?
It's similar. It's similar. It's more laid back. The service dog training is very intense. It's very task trained and very specific. So it takes a lot more. Therapy dogs can be more, just their temperament qualifies them as a therapy dog. But they have to be well behaved and have basic obedience. You have to go through the canine good citizenship test to become a pet therapy dog.
We've got another question that came in. You spoke about it a little bit earlier, but if you wouldn't mind, the question was, how can you find the service dog if you happen to need one?
Like I said, it's a search and find, and it's up to you. Some people go through rescues, but I would strongly encourage you to find a trainer or someone who trains service dogs to do the temperament testing for you when you find a dog that you like. If you have a breed specific that you want, you can purchase a puppy, you can purchase a dog, you can purchase, the breed specific that you want. There's a lot of Facebook groups about service dogs that help you identify breeds that would be good for your specific needs. People who have those needs will talk about what kinds of dogs they've had or what kinds of dogs they do have. The purchase of a dog can be very expensive. But rescuing a dog can be equally as beneficial, and those dogs can do just as well as purchasing a dog. Purchasing a puppy is not always necessary. You can get a dog that's 2 or 3 years old, and then the training takes about 2 years, so the dog's only 6. And hopefully they have a good lifespan. Gavin is 11 and still working, and he's in great shape. So service dogs that work get depressed when they're not working. So you want a dog that's going to have a good lifespan, doesn't have a lot of medical issues, no parvo that affects their heart, things like that. So you have to kind of look into that.
We've got another question on the screen.
Shout out to the people asking questions.
How can I find one of these agencies that might take my dog? I'm assuming that you might want to rehome your dog or surrender your dog. Or are you asking more specifically, you have a dog that you would like to donate or you would like to offer as a therapy dog or a service dog? So I'm not quite clear on that question.
Answer both.
So if you want to have a dog that you want to do therapy with, you can do the therapy dog if you'd like. You can also contact Children's Hospital has a therapy dog program. Ronald McDonald has a therapy dog program. You can contact those agencies and ask if you can bring your dog in, and they have schedules, and It's kind of a good system that they have set up, and they screen the dogs just to make sure that they're ready, even though they have the canine good citizenship testing done. If you want to surrender your dog for service dog work, I would make sure, first of all, that your dog qualifies for service dog work. Again, by finding someone who does training, or like me, who's trained service dogs, who can do the temperament testing for the dog. And then there's multiple organizations, Wounded Warriors, Pets for Vets, take dogs to train them for PTSD for veterans who have returned that need dogs for PTSD. So there's multiple organizations that you can do that if you want to surrender your dog for service or for pet therapy.
Very good, very good. I feel like a lot of people are asking really good questions, so we're fortunate for that.
Oh, she wants to surrender her dog. If you want to surrender your dog, PAWS takes surrenders, the SPCA takes surrenders, ACCT takes surrenders, and as a trainer, I would kind of ask why you want to surrender your dog. And if it's possible for your dog to be rehabilitated, or if there's a behavior that's driving you insane and that's why you want to surrender your dog, and actually your dog could be trained and then you wouldn't have to surrender your dog. Surrendering your dog and placing them in a shelter is very traumatizing for them. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't, because you may have a very valid reason for having to do that. But just like kids in foster care, dogs go through the same thing. Multiple homes and abandonment issues create long-term problems for dogs and create lots of anxiety. So if there's a way that you have a family member or a friend that you could surrender the dog to that wouldn't be put in the shelter, that would be great. If you can find someone who would do emergency foster care for you while you find someone to take your dog, or you put your dog on Pet Finder and put your dog in foster care, so the dog is not in the shelter system, would be my recommendation.
Okay. And you spoke a lot about temperament training.
Mm-hmm.
What goes into that?
A lot.
Do they fill out a Scantron?
Yeah, no. They have to answer a 50 questionnaire. No. No, the temperament training is the dog have a startle response? Does the dog okay with you touching its mouth, opening its mouth, looking at its teeth, looking at its ears, handling its head, looking at its paws,
Aggression.
Yeah, looking for anxiety, looking for aggression, taking the dog out in public settings to make sure that they're not triggered by something, introducing them to other dogs, seeing how they interact with other dogs, how they interact with kids, how they interact with people. The temperament testing is very broad, but it's also very specific at the same time. You look for very specific things for the dogs to be able to do, and then you look for very broad stimulation things that may trigger them. And sometimes you can get a dog and you get the temperament testing and you're ready to go, and the dog does 6 months of training, and then you find out that the dog has a fear of fire alarms and it can't cope, and the dog is disqualified. So that's not something that you test in temperament testing, because you don't know.
Right.
And so a dog, especially a rescue dog, can have some kind of trigger that you never knew existed or even would think about scanning for in your spectrum of
Gotcha.
electronic scanning for your service dog.
That final portion came in. I believe you answered it, but just for reference sake.
Okay, so if you refuse to put him in a shelter, I would definitely contact PAWS. They will do a complimentary or a courtesy posting on PAWS's website to see if you can get your dog adopted. If you really can't care for your dog, you could ask them if you could put their dog in, if their dog will qualify for foster care. ACCT does foster care as well. You can look into that. I would recommend putting him on Pet Finder. Pet Finder is good. It really screens dogs very well to find the appropriate home. But you could call me as well, and we could talk further about that in terms of how to best rehome your dog and not put the dog in a shelter system. I appreciate that you're considering not putting him in a shelter system, because it really is very stressful for the dog.
And your contact info one more time. I'll write it in here as well.
WP Creative Pets on Facebook. My email is wpcreativepets@gmail.com, and my phone number is 215-941-2956. 941 2956.
2956.
Yes.
Gotcha. And WP Creative Pets. @gmail.
Yes. And the cool part about fostering, especially if you have youth and you have a youth in your home, the youth can actually get school credits for fostering a dog, which is something that's new that's come out, which is really great. And you can do community service. Most organizations, unfortunately, cannot do court-ordered community service with dogs, but you can get community service hours for working through nonprofits that take care of dogs like PAWS or HCCT or Morris Animal Refuge. You can get school credits for that as well.
No, when you say school credits, is that college? Is that
Could be college, could be high school. You know, as terms of extracurricular activity credit and stuff like that, they'll track your hours for that and be able to do that, which is really great and really exposes people to the need for fostering a dog. But you do that if you volunteer for the organization, or especially if you foster a dog in the home and the person has to, you know, there's a curriculum for that, so they set it up for you.
Have you been a part of any of those programs?
I'm a part of PAWS. I do fostering through PAWS. I've had Noelle. We got her on Christmas, and she just got adopted on Valentine's Day, which was very exciting. And
forever home?
yeah, she has a forever home now. And
explain that process. What was that like? How long did you have her?
We found her. I was not planning on being a foster parent. Well, first of all, for dogs, I was planning on being a foster parent for children, and now I'm a foster parent for four-legged animals. But Noelle was on the street.
Same thing.
Yeah, maybe. Noelle was on the street on Christmas. It was December 25th, and she was wandering the streets. She's a puppy mill mama. She had been bred multiple times. She's only 2 or 3 years old, but it was very clear that she was a puppy mill mama. And she was very scared. She was looking for her puppies. There was no identifying where her puppies were. A foster parent took her in, and her husband was deathly allergic to the dog, so she had her for 24 hours and posted on West Willie's Facebook page that we need an emergency foster. So she ended up with me, and she got the name Noelle because it was Christmas. And she was with me from December 26th until Valentine's Day. She's leaving on Saturday. The process is really great.
Name her Cupid.
the process is really great. PAWS takes care of all the vet bills, the food donation, medical care, and everything. You provide the housing, the shelter, and you feed the dog, take care of the dog, walk the dog. She was so depressed when she came. She used to curl up in the corner and not even look at me. She wouldn't interact with any of my other dogs. And now she initiates play on her own. She comes and sleeps right on my lap. She's an amazing dog. She's come totally out of her shell, which is another reason fostering is so important. They really rehabilitate in foster instead of in the shelter system. We were going to put her in the shelter, but we decided she would not survive. She would have gone completely depressed and shut down. So she stayed with us, and she learned to play again. She learned how to eat. She stopped being reactive. She was actually a very reactive dog. She would bark and growl and be aggressive towards my other dogs. But my dogs are really well trained, so they didn't react to that. We worked on training her out of that, and now she doesn't react to anything. She's a couch potato, and she's just chill, and she's a wonderful dog, and I'm very excited that she got adopted. So it's a great process, and it's very rewarding.
How'd those people find you?
There's a lot of pictures on PAWS' website. Noelle was posted there, and then foster parents will give a really detailed description of the dog, how the dog is going, what the dog does, how the dog's personality is. And I interviewed almost 5 people, and the woman that's taking her was worried because she has an 11-year-old lab, actually, and who has medical problems, and she was worried about integrating a new dog into her pack. And instead of just totally deciding not to do it, I reached out to her and I said, why don't we discuss how to integrate a dog into a pack? So we did that, and we talked about how she can do it, how she can shape her house, how she can protect her current dog's status in the house and bring Noelle in. And Noelle's a very submissive dog, so it's a lot easier. If you have a reactive dog, it's harder. But she decided to go for it, so she's going to adopt a dog. And so it's just a process of reaching out and connecting with your client and connecting with the person and going that extra distance to say, you know, let's work through this instead of just saying, no, I can't do this. And I did say some people weren't the right fit for Noelle. And I told them flat out that this was the wrong dog for them. So fosters are not necessarily picky. We know the dogs very well because they live with us. So, you know, we know what would be good for them and what would, so.
explain integration. I had a business partner of mine. One of his dogs has some kind of disease, and they put it down maybe like 2 weeks ago. And they got a puppy maybe a week later or something like that. But they also had an older dog. I believe 11's pretty old.
Yes.
So maybe this dog is around that age. He sent me a video, and the old dog wasn't really having the little dog, wasn't really interested. So the integration aspect became interesting to me. So explain what that process is like and how that works.
Pack behavior is really important. There's an alpha in the house, so technically speaking, your friend's dog is technically the alpha because it was the only dog remaining in the house. An alpha status for a dog is the boss, and they have to clear whoever comes in the house. And in my house, Gavin is the alpha for dogs. I'm the alpha for the people. And he's the alpha for the dogs, and any dog that comes in, he greets the dog first and sets the order for the pack because he's the alpha.
What's that look like?
Just like that, shaking and saying, no, this dog can't come in. No, Gavin goes up to the dog, sniffs the dog, checks the dog out, and then his response is either to walk away or to not really engage with the dog, which is a sign that the dog passed the test and that we can go through and keep going. And then the dog gets introduced to the next order of status, which would be Dakota, who is the next oldest, and then to Noelle, who was the last to join our pack. So doing pack order is very important, and it's the best way to integrate. When you're structuring your house for integrating a new dog, you want to definitely maintain your current dog's status in terms of their bed, their feeding area. Sometimes it's good to put up a gate in terms of introductions and just allow it to be really slow instead of really, intense and everybody in everybody's space. It's kind of like you move in with a roommate and your roommate decides to take over half your room and the living room, and you get a little irritated. So especially a senior who's 11 who just lost another dog, that dog goes through a grief cycle. So the dog is probably like, dude, I'm grieving, and you brought a puppy into the house, and now I gotta take care of a puppy and grieve for the loss of a dog. Dogs' bonds when they lose another dog is very severe, actually, and they go through the grief and loss cycle just like humans do. So I would suggest keeping the puppy in a separate space for a while and not necessarily force them to interact. The puppy is going to have a lot of energy and want to introduce himself to the alpha in the house because that's what they do, and that's what they're supposed to do. But sometimes it needs to be more gradual instead of intensive, like dump the dog into the space and be like, hey, work it out. But a lot of the times they will work it out. I have a cat as well, and the cat has a hierarchy in the house, and you have to respect that. And it's fascinating bringing dogs into my house because you watch the behavior change and you watch how they accommodate. Gavin had a spot on my bed that was his spot, but when Noelle came, for some reason he decided to give up his spot and he sleeps on the floor while she's here. So that's very unusual for an alpha to give up their spot in a sleeping quarters, and he sleeps on the floor and she sleeps on the bed. So for some reason he decided that's what she needed, so that's what we do. But learning about pack order and alphas and how they behave and how they introduce themselves is very important. It's kind of like having a boss and a job and employees and staff, and everybody has a pecking order, and if you break the pecking order, people get pissed off. So dogs go through the same thing. So reactive dogs, for example, can have a really hard time integrating. So you have to be really careful and sometimes work with a trainer or someone who can help you integrate the dog into a pack. But it's not impossible. Definitely can be done. But it just has to be careful.
It's not recommended, it doesn't sound like, then, to introduce a new dog while another dog is grieving.
Not necessarily. Sometimes if it's a puppy, the dog will take over like a maternal instinct and, nurture the dog, and it can be good for the dog and not get depressed. Mm-hmm. A dog that loses another dog can be very depressed, so another dog can help that dog cope. It's just a matter of how much intensity that dog can handle. So a puppy and a senior, like Gavin's just like, dude, I'm here, I'm almost retired. I will let you sniff me and lay on top of me, but the playing option is over because I'm 11. But Dakota and Noelle are the same age, so they now roughhouse and play, and they've been integrated, and they're the ones that play, and Gavin just lays around and is just like supervising.
So, explain this reaction. What's it mean to you? I'll hold it up this way so they can see it too.
There's a volume button. I can't take your hand off the bar.
Gavin's just laying there, not reacting to the noise.
So this is the senior?
On the couch laying down.
Yeah, he's doing typical senior. That's his spot. And he's like, okay, you're barking in my face, and I'm going to tolerate this because you're a puppy. He knows it's a puppy. But the puppy is respecting the space. He's not up in the dog's face, barking, biting at him. But that's normal puppy behavior. But the senior is not... He barked once, but it was like a warning bark, but not in a bad way. It's like, hey, this is my couch, back up a little bit, you know, and that's fine. And just because they bark at each other doesn't mean it's negative. That's how they communicate. So, you know, if we say the dog can't bark, it's like us having a conversation but not being able to talk.
Right.
So, you know, it's hard. But the dog didn't overreact. The dog didn't get up. The dog's ears didn't go back. The scruff didn't go up. He didn't bare his teeth. He didn't do any of that. So, I mean, that's a normal interaction. People get really panicked about introducing a new dog and then all the barking that takes place and what the barking means, and different barking tones mean different things.
So we'll go back a little bit to the integration stuff. You mentioned about Gavin kind of, other dogs passing a test. What does it look like when they don't pass a test? Like, what does that look like?
He communicates to the other dogs. The dogs don't interact with the new dog for some reason. I don't know exactly how that gets communicated. There's not barking. Gavin doesn't bark. The only time Gavin barks is if he's alerting and I'm unconscious and I need help. But he doesn't bark. So he'll sniff out a dog, he'll interact with the dog, and then he comes back to me, and then he'll either lay down or he'll sit right next to me, and that's kind of the approval. If the dog is not approved, he actually stands in front of the pack and will not let the dog, he's like perpendicular, he won't let the dog into the pack. So, and the other dogs respect that, and they won't interact with the other dog. They'll stop barking, they'll stop interacting with the dog. But every pack is different, and you can train your packs very clearly. So my pack might be different than Ty's pack if he had a pack, if he actually liked dogs. So, so his pack would be highly OCD and organized and structured. He'd have all shepherds that are doing like business work 24/7. That would be his pack. I don't know about your pack. I'm not sure about your pack.
I'm not sure either. But I don't have a pack.
Yeah, but I mean, each pack is different, and some people don't have packs, and when they don't have packs, it's chaos. And that's when they call and they're like, "My dogs are crazy. You don't understand." I have a dog. Shout out to Pickle. The dog's name is Pickle, and so Pickle. I was introduced to Pickle, and the text messages that I got to Pickle was he was a horrible dog. He was a jumper, he was reactive, he was totally out of control, not being able to be trained. She was so frustrated, she didn't know what to do, and she was ready to throw in the towel. So I said, okay, I'll come over. So I go over, I open the door.
I was going to say, is Pickle me?
No. So I come in, I turn my back to the dog, put my hands down because you don't want to make eye contact first with the dog. You want to put your hands down so the dog can smell your hands, and that's how you introduce yourself to a new dog. So you're more submissive to the dog in their space. So Pickle just sat there. He didn't do anything. Then I gave him some treats. We did some clicker training. He did some sits. He did some downs. He did some walks. He did walk on the leash. His owner was ready to fire me on the spot because she was so pissed off that Pickle didn't do anything bad. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, don't worry. I said, the next time I come, Pickle will show me his true colors. So next time I came, Pickle started jumping, pulling on the leash, showing me his true colors. And so now we're doing training on what really needs to be done. But that's what happens. People will call and say, my dog is a complete mess. And sometimes it's the house. It's the humans and the people. Like, your pack includes humans. It's not just the dogs. So you have to kind of change your house. You have to try and change your reaction to the dog. You have to manipulate the situation. So it's interesting. Pack behavior is fascinating. It's just like psychology that I studied for 15 years is actually being applied to my new career, which is exciting. So, yeah. Interesting.
So finish up along those lines. How are you redefining your passion? What's different? What's the same? What feelings are being elicited?
I think what's the same is the passion for helping those that are vulnerable. Working with kids and in foster care and severe abuse and neglect. I had to walk away from that. And social workers burn out, and sometimes they don't walk away, and that can be very damaging to the client and damaging to the social worker. And I was in a position where I may not have made it. I was so messed up. And people don't hear that part of social work. And so now when I work with dogs, I see dogs that are traumatized, and I have a different reaction, and I'm not as PTSD, but I relate to them, and I can see the same behaviors that kids in foster care have with dogs that are traumatized or people that are traumatized, and the psychology behind that. So now shifting my career completely at 37 to get out of human services, social work, working with people. I now work with people who can't talk, and they're four-legged people. And they can't communicate. And my goal in training is to teach humans how to communicate with their dog and how the dog communicates to them, instead of just training the dog to do certain behaviors, which is a whole other set to training. Is really training the psychology of dogs and how they work, and creating a language so that when I leave, you can still communicate with your dog. It's like having a translator in a foreign country. If the translator leaves, you still don't know the language. But if you learn the language and the translator teaches you to learn the language, then you can survive in the country. So that's kind of my philosophy. Like, I want to teach you how to be sustainable and how to continue to work with your dog after I'm gone. If you need a refresher and you need to call me up because a new behavior happens, that's totally fine. But you should now know the skill set of how to train your dog for whatever does occur by the time I leave. So morphing into this new career, it's wonderful. I set my own schedule. I do what I can handle. I've learned that my disability is not something that's necessarily going to define me, but I have to respect its limitations, and not overexert myself or do things that are going to really press me into a point where I can't work. But it's very rewarding, and I can go for an hour and then I can leave, but then I get text messages and pictures and things of people and dogs that are sitting with cats where they thought the dog was going to attack the cat, and they send me pictures of a dog sitting with the cat, and they're so excited. So it's very rewarding, and it's a different kind of rewarding, and I've kind of put a wall up between my human services and social work, but I did take the skill set with me, but I can't any longer process or work in that field because it would be bad for those clients and it would be bad for me. And that's just not ethical. So I've transferred my skill set to something that I can do and that I can do well, and, help humans to be happier with their dogs and come home and not be stressed out that their dog destroyed their couch, or something happened, or be able to take their dogs on long walks. People are like, I want to take my dog to the park. I'm like, okay, let's train your dog to go to the park, and I wish my dog wouldn't jump up on people when they come to the door. Okay, let's train him not to do that. Or I wish my dog, I wish I could take my dog. Onyx wanted to go into the pet store, but we can't take Onyx into the pet store because he goes crazy in the pet store. So I'm like, okay, let's train him on how to go into the pet store. So anything that presents itself is a problem that needs a solution, not a problem that is a barrier. And so taking my social work skill set of how to process problems and do problem solving in terms of humans interactions and dogs interactions is crucial. But working with trauma, it transfers directly to dogs and their anxiety and their stressors, which is wonderful. And I never thought this was possible. And I always thought I would just do dog walking and barely survive to get through the 2-year abyss that I'm trying to get through. But it keeps me going, and keeps me up and out of bed and motivated and happier and relaxed, and my health has gotten better because of it. I eat better, I sleep better, it's just, the dogs have been amazing, and they just offer so much, and for so much that's happened to them, they're still compassionate and just want love back, and they never give up. Even if they're aggressive and reactive, there's still that core part of them that wants that love and affection and that training to get better. And I think that's what I see now in terms of my goal and my passion is that's where I'm headed, and that's what I'm working on.
So your voice for four-legged animals.
Yes, I'm now the voice for the four-legged animals, and I'm a foster for four-legged animals. It's fascinating. I wanted to be a foster parent for so long, and I realize now I couldn't do that with my physical disability.
Well,
and
you
my,
are a foster parent.
Well, for people, for kids, I that was one of my goals when I was a social worker, was to become a foster parent, and I never got to the position where I could do that because of my medical condition and my stressors, and it would have been bad for me and for the child. But now, I didn't ever consider being a foster parent for a dog, so now it's fascinating and I love it. So when Noah leaves, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but I think I'll probably foster another dog. I just don't know who's going to come in my door. But
Well,
Gavin will have to pass.
You
Gavin will
might
have to
actually
give the
have one coming to you.
What?
You might have one.
Oh
See.
no.
We'll see. I'll probably be the middleman for that.
Okay.
You
No
know,
giant dogs. I have no room for giant dogs.
I don't think it's a giant
And
dog.
once upon a time, I fostered a dog, a pit bull, who I thought that I could care for, had the time for. It actually came to me from a neighbor who abandoned this dog, and I was initially just going to wash her up and find her a home, and then I ended up keeping her for 2 months. And we actually met at the park, and some of her behaviors we tried to fix, or I don't even know what's the proper term, but to work on.
Even find out what the behaviors were, because Harley was acting pretty okay.
Yeah, that day Harley was acting pretty okay. But dogs are really like humans. You know, you never really know where a dog is coming from. You never know what their background is. Just like if you take in, you know, a child in your home, you never know how they were traumatized or if they were ever traumatized. You never know what behaviors they learned or what they were accustomed to. And so me never having a dog and fostering this dog in for 2 months, it was definitely challenging to say the least. But your skill set and just applying, you know, the social work background and the behavior change and the psychological aspect of it is definitely impressed by it. So if you guys need someone, contact her.
But I would also say, on that note, that your fostering for 2 months gave you insight of the demands of having a dog.
Yeah,
and how much it takes, and the time, the finances, and everything. And that's why, if you're gonna get a dog, foster a dog first, so you know before you jump into that. Because if you've never had a dog before, it's like having a kid, you know, and it's overwhelming. And even with 4 dogs that I trained really well, it can be overwhelming. I have a dog that's Houdini, is not his name, but it should be. And he's traumatized with crates, and I put him in a crate and didn't know, and he found every way to break out of that metal crate, and the crate now has dents that look like someone beat the crate to death, and him trying to get out of the crate while I was gone, and I had no idea. And so now we don't crate that dog, but he's fine not crated. But how was I supposed to know? Like you said, they come from all different backgrounds. So.
Yeah, and even that aspect, I don't think people really think about. There's a training process that goes along with just creating a dog or sticking them in a cage.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of processes that go into anything that you do with a dog or any animal for that matter. I had a cat at the time too, and just their dynamics was interesting to watch. Integrating a new pet into the home, even from different, you know, there's a cat and a dog, it's not a dog and a dog. So it definitely was interesting to see, and there's an integrating aspect that comes along with that for a while. I mean, I only had the dog for 2 months. For a while, the cat and the dog were completely in separate rooms, and I had to use the gate. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time and patience, and I give you a lot of props here.
Thank you. And I think that's why one of my taglines is every moment is a training moment. You never know. Like, don't ignore it. If something annoys you, don't give in to the dog. Train the dog. Work with the dog. Work through it. If the dog is traumatized or stressed out or anxious or has an issue, don't avoid it. Like, if you have a dog that can't walk down the street because it meets another dog and you never know what's going to happen, every time you avoid that dog by walking around the car into the street and avoiding that dog, you're reinforcing that the dog should not interact with another dog and reinforcing that fear response. So it's important to find someone or work with a dog that's well-trained or just gentle dog and learn introduction protocol. Some dogs have totally forgotten how to say hi. And that's why they're reactive with other dogs when they meet them on the leash. And some dogs are fine off the leash meeting dogs, but when they meet them on the leash, they go psycho. So every time you avoid a situation, it exacerbates it and makes it worse.
It's like a child.
Yeah.
in the store when they want candy.
And the dog should always work for their rewards. There shouldn't be no freebies.
So let the people know how they can contact you again, because I'm sure people want to know the ins and outs of reinforcement and clicker training and
Clicker
crate
training is the
and all
best.
that.
I'm at WP Creative Pets on Facebook. My email is wpcreativepets@gmail.com, and my phone number is 215-941-2956.